So did I miss an announcement about spiritual alignments? Reverend Eileen, spiritual alignments are happening today? Yes. So
at the end.
yes. Oh, it's in there. Okay. Sorry, just brain bubble. So now I'd like to welcome my dear friend and one of the finest speakers I know, Christopher Campbell, who's going to talk on what we believe about wholeness.
Yes. Hey everybody. Let's get set up here. How's the camera? Good? Yeah. Hi everybody. So welcome everybody and thanks for coming. One thing I've noticed, this is the third time I've spoken here, and one thing I noticed is a very strange type of phenomenon that occurs, which is that I receive the topic and I go, I don't really understand what that means. And it's not obvious, it's not intuitive at first, but as I start to work on the talk, I'm like, oh my God, this community is thinking about all the same things I'm thinking about and working on and developing in myself. So to me, this is an opportunity to not only share with you, but also to heal myself, like to really look within myself. So thank you everyone for giving me that opportunity today. I want to start with an affirmation, and that was part of the notes that the Center for Spiritual Living gave me about the nature of this talk. As Raina said, the topic being our beliefs about wholeness. And it goes like this. I recognize and honor that I am part of one global family. Okay, you want to try that together? I'm going to break it into two parts, call and response. I recognize and honor that I am part of one global family. Wait on, let's try it one more time. And let's do it all together in one sentence. I recognize and honor that I am part of one global family. Thank you. These are such powerful, inspiring, uplifting words. And I noticed the affirmation came paired with a question in those same materials. And I shared it with a friend recently, and they were just like really touched by it. So I thought I would share it now as well. What would it mean? What would it mean to really believe we are all part of one global family and that we are each unique and divine? Wow. So I obviously don't think that I or any of us could answer that in one breath. So I actually just want us to pause for one moment and track, how does it feel in your body when you say that affirmation? Does it feel true? Does it feel easy?
Expansive.
Expansive. Does it feel obvious? Does it feel like something you're actively living? Is it something you're committed to living into? So there are no right answers, obviously. Just notice whatever you noticed, and we'll come back to that. I think what I've come to find is that there is a difference between believing a sentence like that one and living it. Not a contradiction necessarily, but sometimes a distance. One happens in a moment, in a breath, in a space like this, and the other seems to take a lifetime. I'm getting some ears back there. Let me. Is that better?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, great. Thanks, Raina. So that's what I want to explore today is not just whether we believe in oneness, but what it actually takes moment to moment, person to person, to live inside of it. So I include myself in that fully. I'm not giving you a talk as someone who has arrived somewhere that you have not. This is something that I am constantly, humblingly arriving into myself. And it's a journey that I'd like to invite you to join me on. And I actually think it's one of the most important journeys of the time that we're living in right now. So one thing I want to say from the beginning of this journey is I don't think that by doing this, we're becoming better people. Actually, what I think is that we're becoming more fully who we already are. So as the spiritual traditions that many of us are rooted in, they begin with a radical premise That wholeness is not something we create, it's something that we learn to recognize and embody. It's who we already are, and we practice bringing that into lived expression. And I don't think that we learn to recognize it alone. We learn it inside of communities of people like us right here, who are also trying to see clearly and held inside enough love to look again and again, even when it's hard to do that. Am I preaching to the choir here, or? Okay. So I want to say something in genuine admiration, and actually this is part of the reason why I feel so comfortable and happy coming to speak with you. What this affirmation states is not a new insight to Centers for Spiritual Living, is it? Yeah. You've already written it into who you say you are. You know, and this comes from a lot of my background in leadership and organizations, and I say your own organizational language, like the global organization that you're a part of, holds that the oneness of spirit that you teach includes every race, age, ethnicity, culture, history, religion, and life experience. Species. And species, yes, let's go there. Thank you. You have a standing diversity, equity, and inclusion commission whose entire job is making sure that that's not just a sentence on a page. I don't think it's an accident that the language of this statement includes both unity and diversity in the same breath, rather than holding them as two separate virtues. Ecologists actually say something similar about living systems. Like if you have a field that has one crop, it looks all perfect until a disease comes through and the entire thing goes down very quickly. It's actually diversity that protects when the ground starts to shift under us. So at the same time, diversity alone doesn't necessarily make a system healthy. Without some shared root holding it together, difference scatters apart the moment that real pressure arrives. Have you noticed that? Unity needs diversity to stay alive. And diversity needs a ground of unity to hold what gets stirred up when real differences meet. Ernest Holmes was, and that's the founder of these Centers for Spiritual Living, was pointing at the same thing when he wrote that we cannot exclude anything from a divine inclusion. If all humanity expresses the divine, inclusion isn't just a social virtue, it's a spiritual practice. So the question becomes, where have we, or do we unconsciously create exceptions to the circle of belonging? It's a genuinely courageous thing, I think, for a spiritual organization to put all that in writing, to commit to living them. It means you've already admitted as an institution that belief alone doesn't finish the job. If it did, you wouldn't need a commission, you just need the affirmation, right? And this isn't only words on a page. From what I read, your current spiritual leader, Reverend Dr. Sonique Cantrell Smith, did I say that right? Sonique Cantrell Smith stood publicly behind it just last year in a statement affirming transgender people as sacred, whole expressions of the divine. Yes. At a moment when that takes real courage to stand up and say that. You know, this is actually a developmental reality too, not just a consciousness one, or an institutional one, or a theological one. Researchers who study adult development describe growth as a widening of perspective, moving from a way of seeing where your own group's limited view feels like reality. That's just the way things are, toward one that can hold someone else who has a very different view as equally real, and somehow not collapsing them into each other. Diversity and unity. So I'd like to take your commitment seriously enough to sit with the harder question underneath all of it, which is, where does a belief in wholeness leave off and lived wholeness actually begin? And how might any of us start to notice that difference in ourselves without waiting for someone else to point it out, which happens a lot these days? because this is where the affirmation rubber hits the road. So there's a guy I keep seeing clips of on YouTube. He's a Southern contractor. He's built like he could put up a fence on his own with his own bare hands, and I have no doubt that he has. And he does these little monologues about his neighborhood that make me laugh out loud. Sometimes I wonder if the neighborhood is actually real. But anyways, because it's fantastical what he describes. So he'll tell you straight face that he's not sure about all this, kind of gesturing toward the modern world. And then in the same breath, he'll tell you about the couple next door. Two lesbian women, one who drives the boat, while the other helps him process his emotional wounds. He'll tell you about the Mexican family across the street who hands him a plate of food every time he goes over to complain about their music. And that he's 12 pounds heavier since they moved in. And he doesn't seem to be bothered by it. So he's not quite sure about a couple things in modern life. And right before that, right after that, he mentions completely unbothered that his best friend, who happens to be gay, takes him shopping now. And that his girlfriend really likes the way he smells. Oh, and that his skin never looked better. And he says all of this with those like collagen enhancing patches under his eyes. I mean, like, it's very funny. So the cool thing about it, though, is that the joke is never on the neighbors, although he plays with it. Sometimes the way he starts it, you're like, he's saying something so controversial right now. How can he talk about his lesbian neighbors, you know? But then he goes into it and he shows that the joke is actually on him. He is a man slowly getting loved by the same people that he was taught to fear. And I don't think he quite knows what to do with it. So I think about him a lot because I think most of us are him a little bit. Not by any means cruel, certainly no ill intent, but sometimes carrying an old script that keeps getting quietly interrupted by someone else's kindness, someone else's cooking, someone else's wisdom, or someone's friendship. Whether we've caught up to that yet or not. So on that very note, I want to tell you about this. I mean, you can't make these things up. We talk about oneness, and it's like, how does this happen? The other night, I was sitting in a bar waiting for my friend to come so we could order our dinner. And I heard this conversation loud and clear. You know how it's like all in the background, and all of a sudden I'm not listening. It just landed on my ears. This woman says that someone recently asked her what her pronouns were. And she was so confused and so flustered. And in this moment, I mean, her demeanor was so genuinely not unkind, but just confused and a little overwhelmed, right? And the man that she was sitting with said something that surprised me with how honest it was. He said, you know, it's our generation. He's like, when we were kids, if you found out someone was actually gay, the reaction was pure shock. Like, what? Nobody could believe it. So I want to be clear. I want to start with being clear. I was moved by that. It takes something to look at your own history plainly like that. And sadly, a lot of people don't. But here's what stayed with me on the drive home. He turned the mirror on himself, but he never turned it in the other direction. He never said, and if it was that hard for me to believe that someone could be gay, what must it have actually been like to be that person? Yes. Let's sit with that for a second. So there are two different directions a moment like that can go. One direction turns back towards ourselves and says, look how much I've grown. Look how honest I am. The other direction turns it outside and says, tries to imagine actually turning to that person, the one that our history made kind of invisible, and asking them, what did it cost for you to become yourself when you're surrounded by people who couldn't even imagine you? Can you feel the difference between those two directions? One's a little more comfortable. The other, even though it's honest, the other one costs something. It asks you to leave the safety of talking about yourself and go stand for a moment in a life that isn't yours. And I think that gap between turning toward ourselves and turning toward the other person might be the whole distance between believing in oneness and living it. So remember that question I asked us to hold at the start? What would it mean to really believe that we are one global family and that each of us is unique and divine? I don't think we can actually get there, not believe it, but actually live it, and without first looking at the family that we grew up in or the community that we live in. So a few questions. What was okay to talk about at your table growing up, and what wasn't? Who was welcomed in easily without anyone having to think about it, and who required an explanation first? And underneath whatever you were taught to say out loud, what did you actually feel about difference, about the people who didn't fit, about yourself when you didn't quite fit? Actually, most of us never chose the answers to those questions. It's like they got decided for us really early, and by people who didn't choose them either. And once they're in place, they stop feeling like walls at all, and they just feel like the way things are. And I think that's the actual danger. It's not that we're taught to look away from the difference, but that we're taught so early and so quietly that we lose the ability to notice that we're even looking away. Is this making sense? So honestly, I think that's what's dissolving so many organizations and communities right now. It's not one catastrophic betrayal per se, but it's an accumulation of difference that nobody's been trained to sit with. So one of my teachers, Thich Nhat Hanh, who I noticed you have a quote from here, he offers a beautiful image for this, one it's actually in the reading for the topic for this week. He describes a spiritual community as a body where each person is like a cell in a larger organism. And a part that's ignored or treated as if it doesn't belong doesn't only harm that part, it diminishes the whole. So it's the same architecture at every scale, whether it be your family, an organization, or what we mean by global family. The question is always the same. Whose experience quietly became unreal to you long before you ever chose that? Your own materials for this week put it this way, and I want to hand it back to you exactly as it was given. While diversity is a fact, creating belonging without othering is a conscious practice. It requires a willingness to look at our individual and collective hidden beliefs to discover who we include in our circle of belonging and who we leave out. That's a functional family at any scale. Most of us, most of the time, are living in something closer to the first one without ever feeling the walls that make it so. So what does it look like? What do those walls look like? I want to tell you about two people guarding exactly this kind of wall. First, I want to talk about one of my favorite characters in a show I've been watching. Her name's Lupe. She's my favorite. Lupe is sharp-tongued, funny, a little bit fierce, and if we're honest, she makes life harder for most of the people around her than she probably has to. In particular, she cannot stand to watch her niece fall in love. Every time the girl gets close to the young man she adores, Lupe finds some reason to interrupt it. You know this type? The chore that suddenly needs doing, a warning that suddenly needs giving, a set of threats to the young man who's one of her employees that she manages. She tells herself she's protecting the girl. One day, an old friend, the gardener, who's kind of silent and watches everything, right? Someone that's known Lupe for a long time, says something simple to her. He says, the two lovers remind him of Lupe and the man she loved long ago, before it ended, before whatever happened, happened. He doesn't accuse her of anything. He just holds up the resemblance and lets her see it. And for one unguarded moment, something moves across her face, not anger, grief. A wall she built so long ago she forgot it was a wall. Now I want to tell you about someone else. Call him Ray. Ray's son sits him down one night to have the tough conversation, telling his dad that he's gay. Ray doesn't yell. He says the right things, mostly. I love you. Nothing changes between us. Then he goes downstairs, pours a drink, and calls his brother. His brother comes over. Soon the conversation has moved away from his son entirely toward the mother who babied the boy, toward the school that's teaching him all of these crazy things, the world changing too quickly, and how none of this ever happened when they were kids. Everything except the grief and the fear that he's actually feeling inside. By the end of the night, Ray feels lighter than he has in a while, and he sleeps just fine. Over time, his son visits less frequently. And Ray tells himself that's just what happens when kids grow up. Lupe's wall has a door in it. Somebody found it. And for 1 second, she stood in its opening. Ray's wall doesn't have a door. It's a basement. It has a basement bar and a brother and a drink and a story about a mother who babied her son. And it never once has to open because there's always someone else nearby willing to help him not look. So let's go back to the guy at the bar that I was listening to. What would it have looked like if in that moment he'd made the turn that stays out of reach for anyone protecting a wall? Not just, I can't believe how close-minded we were, but what if he turned toward a gay person and said, I wonder what it cost you to live inside that closed-mindedness. I wonder what it took for you to still become yourself in a room full of people who couldn't even imagine you. Think about that for a second. My beloved Thich Nhat Hanh says that understanding is love's other name, that you cannot truly love someone and if you haven't first understood them. To understand someone, he said, you have to listen, not listen to confirm your own goodness. Listen to actually receive what their life has been like. I'll speak from my own body for a moment. I'm a queer person. I have spent a great deal of my life in rooms that said and meant it, you're welcome here. And I can tell you there is a difference between being welcomed and being felt, being known. Welcomed means there's a place set for you at the table. Felt means someone actually turned mid-conversation to find out who's sitting in it. Known means somebody actually takes the time to ask, what has it been like for you? And truly receive that, even if it's painful to hear. I've been welcomed into many rooms in my life, and I could probably count on 2 hands the number of times it felt truly felt and known. I'm sure there are other people in this room who could agree with that. I don't say that to indict anyone. I say it because I think most of us, myself included, have been the man at the bar at some point, capable of astonishing honesty about ourselves and still one turn short of actually seeing the other person or the parts of ourselves that our history has taught us to not fully see. We worked on that in our meditation today, turning toward the parts of ourselves that we sometimes ignore. How important that is as a foundation for turning our attention outward. I have to say, I feel something different in a room like this. Not perfect, none of us are, but one that has chosen on purpose to keep practicing together. That's part of what makes this kind of honesty possible at all, is that we're willing to try. So what do we actually do with this once we walk out of this room? The Center for Spiritual Living is asking you to start somewhere small this week. One simple practice they give. Notice what you believe is good to eat and what you think is awful. Food likes and dislikes, they say, are almost never something we chose. They're in culture, family, religion, and they were often decided for us before we begin to question them. So they're asking us to notice if any judgment arises towards someone who eats differently than you do. And if you can catch that judgment in something as small as food, maybe it will open for us to recognize the way it's been hiding in other places. Another suggestion, very pertinent for these times. Pay attention this week to othering language. Wherever you meet it, in the news, in the social media, in the conversation, or in your own head, just notice where it comes from, that othering language. Then ask yourself one small doable thing. What would it look like to take one real step of bridging towards someone that you've quietly filed under different from me? Bridging doesn't mean pretending differences don't exist, and it doesn't require us to erase history, minimize harm, or agree on everything. It means allowing another person's humanity to become real to us without requiring them to become identical to us. This is wholeness in action. This is oneness lived. So back to where we started. I recognize and honor that I am part of one global family. Say it with me.
I
I recognize and honor that I am part of one global family. Notice what's different this time. Does it feel different to say that now that we've gone on this journey together? Again, no right answers, just notice. When I went back to practice this talk, repeating the affirmation before and after, I noticed how much richer it became for me. It stopped being just an inspiring statement of truth, expansive and buoyant, and it became something closer to a statement of responsibility, also poignant, grounded even deeper in my own heart and my own humanity. It came filled with every time I felt othered, every time I may have othered someone else without meaning to, and what it actually takes to practice this awareness in real time with real people who might themselves also have felt othered. That's humbling. What I feel now is this wholeness that I hadn't expected, but I know I do believe in. It's a wholeness that holds my past suffering and my fledgling growth alongside my infinite potential. A wholeness that includes the ways we're already connected, the ways we unconsciously participate in division, and the ways we're still growing into actually living our oneness. I don't think that sentence is asking us to feel something once. I think it's asking us to keep making a turn. The one the man at the bar didn't quite make. The one that neither fear nor protection can make on its own. Toward the people and the disowned parts of ourselves that our walls have made hardest to see. Not because we're bad for having missed the turn, but because wholeness was never and is never a finished belief. It's a family we're still learning how to actually live inside, one honest turn at a time. This isn't always easy work. The good news is none of us has to make that turn alone. That's what a community like this one is actually for. And I actually want to thank all of you for being here and inviting me here so that we can practice this together. And so it is.
So it is.